Good morning. Sorry I didn't get this video out to you last night, um, but hopefully you get to see this when you wake up and you can start working on some of these things. Per our conversation yesterday on the phone, I'd still like you to kind of push forward on the materials. I have some time scheduled today to get some help on picking through that hair system and so we can kind of diagnose what's going on there. So when working on the materials, I think your texture maps are looking great. As far as the painting of them, if there's anything that you would want to work on, it's maybe smoothing out some of these curves. It's not a huge deal, but I'm seeing just a little bit of kind of wavering in there. Um, but painting wise, that would be maybe one of the things I would push. Um, and if you'd want to push her makeup a little bit further, um, to get more contrast between those colors. Um, so the value between your tones, right, are pretty subtle right now. So not a lot of it's really popping. Um, but where you're at, I would probably maybe work on the materials before you went back and painted that color because I'm going to push you to use some subsurface scattering on some of these materials, and that's going to affect the color. We're also going to start getting some reflectivity into these materials as well. So for the rendering, you'll notice that I changed the aspect ratio so I could get a bigger image while I'm rendering it. It also allows me to crop in a little tighter so there's not a lot of wasted pixels to each side. When you make your final piece for your demo reel, you would keep a standard HD aspect ratio, but when you're posting to your ArtStation, don't be afraid to change the cropping, or when you're rendering for just you personally to look at things, don't be afraid to change the aspect ratio, change how you're cropping that composition. In the render settings under common, that's that's where I made the change. So I'm at 1500 pixels by 2500 pixels. The other thing I did is under features, I turned on the denoise for each frame, and that's just going to help kind of pull some of that noise out, and you can still keep your samples at a lower resolution. So very quickly you can get those renders out, get something to look at, but it's just going to be a little less noisy. Going into your materials, if we look at the head material here, the main things I'm going to ask for you to start playing with would be the primary specularity. You can use artistic or physical. Physical, you're going to put in a actual refraction index, and then you'll give it an edge color. So with the refraction index, that's actually going to say how much light bounces towards the camera and then how much light glances kind of at a glancing angle. Okay, so if you want to treat this physically, it's going to be a real world simulation of what that skin should be, and you can find those values online. So if we just go ahead and open up a browser here. So refractive index of skin. All the refractive indexes are out there. So it looks like for skin is 1.43 for the refractive index. And you can look this up. I know out there are, so right here, you can look at multiple materials, so glass, sapphire, diamonds, but you can get the refractive index of many materials out there. So if you want to treat it physically, that's fine. Your other option is to turn it to artistic, and then you're controlling how much by the face color bounces towards the camera and then how much glances off on the edges. So this one you have more control. This one is more of a simulation. So I'll cover it because this is cartoony. I'm going to cover it with the artistic one. So your face color, really it's going to be the values that you change. So if I put this to 0.3, right, it changes the value here, and you can see how much light is bouncing towards the camera. The edge will usually bounce more than the face, so I'm going to put this to maybe 0.6 and double it. And if I re-render this over here, you're going to see she's going to be very glossy or very shiny. So skin is very reflective, but because of the skin pores and the micro details, that is broken up and it's dispersed in many directions, so we don't see a clear reflection. So right now we're seeing a very clear reflection on the skin. So down here is your roughness. Right now the roughness is at 0.2. You can see if I start cranking this up, the highlight is starting to spread out and it's not looking as reflective. So I usually go somewhere around between 0.7 and 0.9 for skin. Let me just cancel this. You can also use your cropping tool right here to crop in on what you want to render. So for just working on the skin, there's no need for me to go outside that area. So now you can see it doesn't feel as reflective up here, right? But we do get more contours to the face because now we're introducing highlights. So not only do we have shadows, but we also have highlights on that face. So from here you could go in and adjust these. So maybe 0.3 is a little drastic. Maybe we want to go 0.2, and for edge, I still like to keep the edge pretty high, but we could try 0.45. And you would make these adjustments until you felt happy with the results that you're getting. So that's step one, and I'm going to ask you to do that with the latex materials on her, as well as start playing with the specularity so you can get it to feel like that synthetic material. So if it's not latex, it's a vinyl or that kind of shiny synthetic spacesuit that we would be looking for. The next thing is under subsurface. So this subsurface model up here, or there's several in here, these are all going to be more realistic, right? You would turn them on by turning on the gain, but we're going to start with looking at the single scatter instead. There's really only two things for you to adjust here. Excuse me. But we'll turn on the gain, and this is going to turn it on to 100%. You can see it gets kind of gelatin-like. Let me turn that off so it looks a little harder. Now it's going to look a little bit more gelatin. I would go ahead and render it once out here just to see what your base subsurface looks like. Now this is very dependent on scale. Okay, so if you're working off of real world units, right now this would be saying it's going to scatter in 10 millimeters. So if your character is big enough, by default, it might just look okay, right? So what you're going to see or notice is shadowed areas are going to get softer, and light is going to be brought in and refracted back out. So what can happen is sometimes if the scale's off, your character can feel like it's glowing. I'm not seeing the glowing effect here. I am seeing more so the softening of the shadowed areas. If you did need to adjust this, I tend to go to the scattering globals first, and the unit length right here you can adjust, and this is a global modifier, so it's going to adjust everything. Okay, so if I put this to say 0.05, and I would render this again, we should see a change, and again this is doing it globally. I usually do globally first till the skin's feeling close to what I want, and then I will go in and adjust kind of each one of these attributes. For the color, you can leave this to white, or you can take your current skin map and adjust it so it's a lighter color, almost a less saturated version of what your skin is. So this is the topmost layer of skin, and then the mean free path color is going to be what color is happening when light kind of penetrates the skin and then is getting reflected back out of it or scattered back out of it. So here we're just seeing a very subtle adjustment. If we turn this, just to kind of really play around with these colors. And at first, before you settle on anything, I would just do some extreme changes. Anytime I'm using like a new shader, I'll do extreme changes to kind of see what's happening with each one of those. So you can see it brought a lot more color in here. It looks more cartoony because this value is just not what it would be in the real world. But since your character is cartoony, we can do some of those things. So start playing with some of those values. Start playing with the scatter. Cloth can scatter. Leather can scatter. Softer materials are going to scatter. So you could even, if you wanted to, you could even use the scatter on the other clothing. So you wouldn't just necessarily have to use the scatter only on her face or her head. So I would say let's start working on the materials, because like I said, I feel your textures are starting to come out really good. Let's get the materials to work well with them. Once you're happy with the first pass, the next thing would be is you can paint value maps for all of these. So if we go, let's say, to the specular and the roughness, and you want her lips to be shinier than the rest of her, right? Essentially, you can paint a grayscale map, black and white map. 1 is white, 0 is black. So if you're painting inside of Photoshop, or I know you talked about Substance, if you put in 0.8 as your value, so you want to set your color space to HSV, the value being the number right here that you'd be controlling. So 0.8 is what you'd like for the global scale of your skin. You'd paint in gray and the value would be 0.8. And then if you wanted something to be shinier, for this roughness, you'd want it to go closer to 0. So then for the lips, maybe you paint a value of 0.2 or 0.6. You'll come to what you think that value should be. And maybe around her eyes, you want those to be glossier. Same thing. Speaking of eyes, I'd check your eye shader as well, just to make sure that you have some specularity there. But that's about it. So I'll send this video over to you if you want to start working on the materials this week, and I will try to get sorted as soon as possible a solution to your hair. I'm going to send out an email to everyone I'm art directing, but I will be out as of Friday this week. So I have Ken Norman, another art director. He'll be critiquing you next week and helping you out as of Friday. And then when I get back, I'll still be grading everyone's milestone 4, and I can touch base with everyone on kind of where everyone ended up towards the end of this month. So you're doing good. I'm really impressed with everything you're studying, everything you're doing. So if you have any questions, reach out to me. Like I said, I'm here until Friday morning, and then Ken will be kind of helping out my students.